Hi everybody, Steve Griffiths here, developer of the MTPredictor software program. Well, where do I start? MTPredictor had an absolutely amazing day yesterday, and this is fairly typical of the cyclical nature of trading because it's been fairly quiet over the last few days with smaller trades, but then what happens is the cycle goes round and you suddenly get an absolutely massive trade like we had yesterday. So I want to have a look at this in the ES, and this actually sums up basically why I designed MTPredictor well, almost 15 years ago now, 15 years ago. So let's have a look at this. Here's a 3-minute chart of the ES. You can see we had some trade setups here for standard traders. It would be on a black stroke grey STF. So this would have been a standard trade here, this TS3 buy setup, place the analysis on. Even at the first target, this would have been a nice 4.6 hour profit. Trade setup here would have been against the blue STFs you'd have avoided. However, for the more experienced users among you, you'd have known this would actually have been what we call a holy grail trade setup. So I want to go through this and show you guys what I mean. And pay attention to this because these are the trade setups that make you the big money. So what is a holy grail trade setup? Well, a holy grail trade setup is where we are looking to trade the wave 2 or off the end of a wave 2 to trade the whole of a wave 3. And if I put the major pivots on here, you can see what I mean. So in other words, if I come up to the top here, right mouse click, do Elliott wave major, you can see that the market actually made an initial rally. That would be considered wave 1, an initial decline, but more importantly, this initial decline subdivides into an ABC. So I've actually put the Elliott wave pattern on here. You can see that was an ABC. This all comes into the area of a wave 2. If I do Elliott wave major, you can see this is right in our wave 2 or B WPT, and that then gives you a wave, the end of a wave 2. You then get our trade setup that goes to potentially a wave 3. In other words, we're looking to take profit at our typical wave 3 WPT. Why is this nicknamed the Holy Grail trade setup? Well, it's nicknamed the Holy Grail trade setup because if I put the analysis on here and I take the risk reward up to the typical wave 3 WPT, which is here, you can see the profit on this trade was approximately 12 times greater than the initial risk. In other words, these are the best trades I've ever found. Basically, it's because you're getting in right at the end of the wave 2, right at the start of the wave 3 with the smallest initial risk. So I'll just change that to our default account there, which is 20,000 US dollars. So we come in with 4 contracts. Remember, we use correct position size and to keep our initial risk small under control. So we come in with our smallest possible risk for our biggest profit, potential profit. Remember, a wave 3 is the strongest and longest swing in a completed 5-wave sequence, so it's the best to trade. And here you can see that this basically had you long from pretty much the low of the day yesterday to take profits at pretty much the high of the day. So as a day trader, you couldn't have done any better yesterday. It was absolutely a marvelous trade, and all set up because this was a Holy Grail trade setup. So that's the basis of the Holy Grail trade setup. In other words, we're looking to catch the ABC correction in the initial decline off an important low to then trade the wave 3. So of course you're all asking, how do we know whether this is an important low? Well, the way we do this is if we go to the higher time frame chart. In this case, it would be the 15-minute chart. Remember, we used a time frame between 3 and 5 time frames higher. So if you're trading, say, daily charts, it would be a weekly chart. If you're trading, say, Forex on a 15-minute chart, it would be an hourly chart. And we go back to the previous pivot low, which would have been this intermediate low or intermediate low on the previous day. We go to decision point, and that would then give you a support level on the chart. Now, the good thing about these DPs is that they are on the chart in advance. They are leading indicators. They are there before the market even gets there. But for this particular trade setup, this decision point support came in at the low of the previous day. We then had an initial rally up and initial correction down, as you can see on our this was actually on our 3-minute chart. Let's use the last for any resistance areas. Let's use the last swing to the low. So we come back and use this DP here. Now for For those of you who are worrying that this may have provided some resistance, what we do is we look for 2 consecutive closes beyond the DP to confirm that the DP is then going to be breached and therefore continue. In other words, it can be a trade continuation trade. That's the first close on the first bar, first 15-minute bar of yesterday. The second consecutive close was here. So by 10 o'clock yesterday morning, we had confirmed that the market was up and was gone beyond this DP resistance. Would we have used this DP support, this DP off this pivot here, which may have confused some users? No, we wouldn't have done, because this was just an intermediary pivot. Remember, we used the last swing into the high or low. So that was the last swing into the low, therefore that's the pivot we use, not this one. This is what we teach in our trading webinars. You may have come back and said, well, actually we had a double bottom the previous day, so you may well have come back to this pivot here and actually said that might be an area of resistance as well. So I'll just have that on the chart as well, but as you can see, that was way up there. So can you see how the previous low here was coming off 15-minute support? In other words, we were coming off support on a higher time frame. The market went through there, so that would not have been considered as resistance. In other words, it would confirm that the trend was going up. So I'll just take that off just to keep the chart cleaner. If we go back to the 3-minute chart now, let's zoom out a bit. Can you see how suddenly this all makes sense? In that here we had 15-minute support. In other words, support at a higher time frame. Therefore, that defined that as an important low. Well, after the important low, we had an initial rally. In Elliott wave terms, that would be a wave 1. We then had an initial decline. In Elliott wave terms, that would be a wave 2. If I place the Elliott wave major on, you can see it actually says wave 2 or B, but because we know this is an important low, we know this is a wave 2. This wave 2 then subdivides into a minor ABC, which you can see here. Therefore, that would give us our wave 2 correction. As we've seen already, this would then be deemed a wave 3. Whoops, sorry. Just take that off there. I want to do the Elliott wave major. Just clear last. Elliott wave major, that's what we want. This would be then considered a wave 3, and that's the kind of move we're looking for. So I'll just clear the chart off here. So how do we trade this? Well, because we know this is a TS3 buy setup, we then place our analysis on the chart. Because we know this is a potential Holy Grail trade setup, because this is important support or higher time frame support, and because it's on a 15-minute chart, this would be the initial rally, this would be the initial correction. Therefore, we're not going to look to come out at the minimum wave C WPT. We're actually aiming for the typical wave 3 WPT as our target. So we knew as soon as we came into this trade setup that we're looking for a Holy Grail trade. Therefore, our target would have been the typical wave 3 WPT. Remember, this would have been before the market even got up there. So therefore, our target would have been a potential 12-hour profit. Looking at the trade now, as I've already said, this means you'd have got in at, well, the TS3 buy setup was off the very bar of the low of the day yesterday, and it, as you can see, it looks like the typical wave 3 WPT caught the very high of the day. But the most important thing is this trade here would have been highlighted or would have been signaled well before the market even got there. You'd have been known you're looking for a Holy Grail trade setup, and the result would have been a really quite massive profit of 12 times the initial risk. So these are the kind of trade setups that you need to be looking for, because they produce really big profits, and this is what helps your trading account grow. It's not necessarily having a high percentage of winning trades, it's having trades that are much bigger than your losses. And this is why I designed the Holy Grail trade setup in the first place, because it's designed to come in with the smallest controlled risk for the largest potential profit. And that yesterday was absolutely a perfect example of a Holy Grail trade setup that I'm hoping all MTPredictor users have caught. Or if you're not using MTPredictor, hopefully you can see the benefit now of the MTPredictor software program to be able to alert you to potential trades like this, where the profits are much larger than the initial risks. So yesterday was an absolutely brilliant day for MTPredictor on the ES with this absolutely massive Holy Grail trade setup.